Olga Merkusheva paid for signing the official form with her heart, liver, kidneys, and her own life. Her one-day marriage to a man who called himself an Indian prince ended not in a honeymoon suite, but on an operating table in a private clinic in Abu Dhabi, where her body was methodically dismantled for sale. This case did not receive wide coverage in the world press, remaining a series of short notes in the closed databases of human rights organizations and a quiet investigation between the diplomatic departments of several countries. The story began on social media, like many modern tragedies. In April 2023, 25-year-old Olga Merkusheva, a resident of St. Petersburg, was on a tourist trip to the Persian Gulf countries. She actively maintained her Instagram profile, sharing photos of skyscrapers, desert landscapes, and exotic food. However, one of her posts abruptly changed the tone of her digital diary. Underneath a photo of her smiling next to a tall man with a well-groomed beard and an expensive suit, there was a short caption: "I fell in love with the man of my dreams. He's like something out of a movie, an Indian prince." This post, which garnered several hundred likes, became the starting point of a journey that led, not to family happiness, but to a sterile operating room without windows. The man in the photo was 31-year-old Sahil Raja Singh Bahadur, who introduced himself to Olga as the heir to an ancient family and the Prince of Jaipur. For someone unfamiliar with the intricacies of Indian aristocracy, it sounded convincing. In reality, the institution of princely states in India was abolished decades ago, and although the descendants of Maharajas continue to use their titles unofficially, they have no legal or political power. For Sahil, the son of a former minister of the state of Maharashtra, it was just part of a carefully crafted image that worked flawlessly on young women from other countries. He had all the attributes of success: impeccable English, expensive watches, stories about private parties, and acquaintances with world celebrities. His stories were backed up by his family's real financial status, which made the lies almost indistinguishable from the truth. He invited Olga to Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates, under a pretext she couldn't ignore, for an immediate wedding and the start of a life together. Judging by her messages to a close friend in St. Petersburg, Olga was convinced of the seriousness of his intentions. She described what was happening as a fairy tale: a gold ring with an impressive diamond, presented on the very first evening, a personal driver at the wheel of a black Rolls-Royce waiting for her at every exit, and a room at the Emirates Palace Hotel, a complex whose construction cost exceeded $3 billion, and which is known for its unmatched level of luxury. Her messages were full of delight and disbelief in her own happiness. She described the marble halls, the private beach stretching for over a kilometer, and the personal butler assigned to her suite. All this created the illusion of complete security and confirmed the status of her chosen one. The day after her arrival, on April 6th, the tone of her messages changed. In the morning, she sent her friend a short voice message, which would later become key evidence in the unofficial investigation into her disappearance. Olga's voice sounded muffled, with a mixture of excitement and poorly concealed anxiety. "Today, we will be officially married according to Muslim traditions. I'm a little scared, but he said it's temporary, to legalize our relationship for the hotel." The explanation Sahil gave Olga was absurd from a legal point of view, but in an atmosphere of all-consuming luxury and trust in a man who seemed omnipotent, it apparently sounded plausible enough. That was her last message. After that, her phone stopped responding, and her Instagram account went silent. To the outside world, Olga Merkusheva had simply disappeared into the vastness of the richest city on the planet. The silence lasted 11 days. For her family and friends in Russia, it was an alarming but understandable silence. Olga could have been absorbed in a new romance, a trip, or preparations for a wedding in a foreign country. In a world where communication is instantaneous, her absence from the internet was noticeable. but did not yet cause panic. The real story at that time was unfolding not in instant messengers, but in the sterile corridors of the private Al Noor Specialty Hospital. This elite medical facility in Abu Dhabi, known for serving royal families and wealthy expatriates, values patient confidentiality above many formal protocols. It was here, away from prying eyes, that the system failed. A crack in the wall of silence appeared thanks to one of the junior resident doctors, Dr. Yahya Abbas. He initiated an internal investigation, which, according to his plan, was supposed to remain unnoticed. But information about it leaked out through an anonymous communication channel that he had established with a small international human rights organization. In his encrypted message, Dr. Abbas outlined facts that violated every conceivable medical and legal norm. According to him, the body of a young woman of European appearance was brought to the intensive care unit without any accompanying documents proving her identity. According to a verbal order from the clinic's management, she was to be registered as an organ donor after an accident. However, it was the details of this accident that aroused Abbas's suspicions. He noted two critical inconsistencies. First, the body wasn't delivered by an ambulance crew or the police, which is standard procedure for traffic accidents, falls from heights, or any other incident requiring emergency hospitalization. The patient was brought in a private car without medical identification marks, which entered the hospital grounds through the service entrance intended for staff and deliveries. Second, there was no record in the logbook of a police report or even an initial examination at the scene of the accident. The body simply appeared in the clinic's system, as if it had materialized out of thin air. According to internal documents that Dr. Abbas managed to secretly photograph, the heart, both kidneys, liver, and corneas were removed within 4 hours of the official declaration of brain death. Such speed testified to the highest degree of readiness and coordination of the surgical team. This was not a spontaneous reaction to tragedy, but a pre-planned operation. The donor was listed in the documents as a certain Fatima bint Khalid, 29, a Syrian citizen. The choice of such a person was a cynical and calculated move. Syrian refugees scattered throughout the Middle East often had problems with their documents. Their registration was difficult, and diplomatic protection from their war-torn country was virtually non-existent. Such a woman could disappear, and no one would look for her. For the system, she was the perfect ghost. A formal fingerprint check yielded no matches with any of the databases of the Persian Gulf countries or Interpol, which only reinforced her status as unknown. However, it was Dr. Abbas's anonymous report that set off a chain of events. Human rights activists, having received the information, began their own investigation, comparing data on Fatima's arrival at the clinic with a database of female tourists who had recently gone missing in the region. They drew attention to the case of Olga Merkusheva, whose Instagram profile had gone silent during the presumed period. Using photos from her social media accounts, they were able to convey two key physical characteristics to their contacts in Abu Dhabi: a small but noticeable scar on the right side of her abdomen, left over from an appendectomy she had as a teenager, and a distinctive mole above her right collarbone, which was visible in many of her beach photos. A few days later, confirmation arrived. A source inside the clinic, risking his career and freedom, was able to access the body before it was prepared for cremation, and confirmed that the distinguishing features matched completely. The unknown Syrian woman, Fatima bint Khalid, and the missing Russian tourist Olga Merkusheva turned out to be the same person. The body, which was supposed to disappear without a trace, was given a name. And Olga's disappearance ceased to be just an alarming silence and turned into a case of deliberate murder disguised as an act of medical donation. The identification of Olga Merkusheva's body became the key that allowed a glimpse into the well-oiled and ruthless mechanism operating in the shadows of the glittering facades of several Middle Eastern and Asian megacities. An investigation conducted by human rights activists and sympathetic insiders revealed that Sahil Raja Singh Bahadur was not just a lone fraudster, but an important link in an international program of illegal contract donation. This network was a shadow consortium operating through a network of premium private clinics located in Delhi, Abu Dhabi, and Muscat. Their target audience was not desperate poor people willing to sell a kidney for a few $1,000s, but young healthy women from countries whose citizens do not always receive adequate diplomatic protection: Eastern Europe, India, the Philippines, and Malaysia. The scheme was based on the cynical use of marriage as a legal loophole. The victims were not kidnapped off the streets or forced to donate by direct use of force. Instead, they were drawn into a carefully staged performance, the ultimate goal of which was to obtain a fictitious marriage certificate. Sahil and others like him played the role of wealthy and influential suitors, ready to do anything for their chosen ones. They surrounded the victim with extravagant luxury, gave expensive gifts, and proposed marriage in the shortest possible time. The key moment of the operation was a quick wedding ceremony, often within a day or two of the woman's arrival in the country. These marriages were not registered in state institutions, but through loyal religious centers, where Sharia judges, such as Sheikh Abdul Majid Al-Naimi, who registered Olga's union, conducted the procedure on the basis of a minimum set of documents, and often in the absence of witnesses on the bride's side. Once the signature was affixed, the woman's legal status changed dramatically. From a foreign tourist, she became the wife of a local resident or influential foreigner. This status, according to the twisted logic of the organizers, gave them the right to make medical decisions for her in the event of her sudden incapacity. Signatures on forms consenting to organ donation after death were most likely forged or obtained by deception, slipped into a pile of other papers supposedly necessary for marriage or residence permits. In Olga's case, this scenario was carried out with surgical precision. After she sent her last voice message, she was apparently persuaded to take some kind of sedative under the pretext of preparing for her wedding night, or to relieve stress. Further events are reconstructed based on the findings of a forensic medical examination conducted unofficially before cremation. The cause of death was severe traumatic brain injury caused by a strong blow to the back of the head with a blunt object. This blow did not kill her instantly, but caused extensive bleeding in the brain, leading to a condition medically defined as brain death. For the organizers, this was the ideal outcome. The victim's heart continued to beat, maintaining blood flow to her organs and keeping them viable for transplantation, while from a legal standpoint, she was already dead. She was then taken to Al Noor Clinic under the guise of being an accident victim and under the false name of a Syrian refugee. UAE police later claimed that there was no record in their system of a Russian citizen with the surname Merkusheva entering the country on the dates in question, indicating that her data may have been deleted from the immigration database, an operation requiring a high level of access and influence. The final stage of the scheme was the disposal of the body. Cremation, not a common practice in the Islamic world, was chosen as the most reliable way to destroy all evidence. The ashes left over from the victim had no biological value for the investigation, and the official death certificate in the name of the fictitious Fatima bint Khalid closed the case without leaving any clues. The consequences of the exposure of this scheme were as depressing as the crime itself. Despite Olga's confirmed identity and the presence of a witness in the form of Dr. Abbas, the system they were trying to fight proved impenetrable. None of the key players in this tragedy faced criminal charges, and justice was reduced to a series of formal letters and financial penalties that were disproportionate to the cost of a human life. The main suspect, Sahil Raja Singh Bahadur, the man who lured Olga into a deadly trap, returned to Mumbai unhindered. The United Arab Emirates authorities never brought formal charges against him or requested his extradition. Without this, the Indian law enforcement system was powerless. Journalists' inquiries to his family went unanswered. Sahil himself reportedly continues to live a luxurious lifestyle, attending social events and running the family business. He is protected by a wall of money, influential lawyers, and jurisdictional barriers that make him virtually invulnerable. To the world, he remains what he was, a wealthy heir, not an accomplice to murder. The fate of the only person who showed integrity in this story turned out to be tragic. Dr. Yahya Abbas, who passed the information on to human rights activists, was immediately dismissed from the Al-Noor clinic on the pretext of gross violation of corporate ethics and medical confidentiality. 3 days after his dismissal, he disappeared without a trace. His colleagues claimed that he was going to leave the country, fearing for his safety. No one has seen him since. His disappearance sent a silent but crystal clear message to anyone who might consider taking similar action in the future. The system demonstrated that it is not only capable of covering up crimes, but also of effectively eliminating those who try to shed light on them. Al-Noor Specialty Hospital itself suffered only minor reputational and financial losses. Following an internal investigation initiated by the UAE Ministry of Health, the hospital was fined a large administrative penalty, and its license to perform organ transplants was suspended for 6 months. However, none of the top management or members of the surgical team that performed the organ removals were held criminally responsible. The official conclusion referred to serious violations in the maintenance of documentation and patient identification protocols. But the intentional nature of the crime was ignored. For the clinic, this was merely a temporary inconvenience, the price to pay for running a shady but extremely lucrative business. Sharia judge Sheikh Abdul Majid Al-Naimi, whose signature appeared on Olga's marriage certificate, also escaped any responsibility. In his only comment to the press, he stated that he had acted in strict accordance with the law and that the documents provided to him by the parties did not raise any doubts as to their authenticity and did not contain any signs of violations. After that, he flatly refused to communicate further, citing the confidentiality of information about the persons who had approached him. The official response from the Russian side also reached an impasse. The diplomatic mission in the UAE sent an official request for the release of Olga Merkusheva's body for independent examination and burial in her homeland. The response received from the Emirati authorities was brief and final. It stated that the body of a foreign citizen registered as Fatima bint Khalid was buried in accordance with Islamic traditions, as no relatives came forward to claim it within the established time frame. Therefore, further identification is impossible. This statement contained at least 2 false claims. First, the body was cremated, not buried, and second, her identity had been reliably established. Thus, Olga Merkusheva was erased twice, first physically, then in the documents. Her Instagram page was deleted, and her bank accounts, to which Sahil probably had access as her legal spouse, were emptied. The only material evidence of her last day was a photocopy of her marriage certificate, issued on April 6, 2023. On the paper, stamped with an official seal, the names of the husband and wife were written in Arabic script. In the bride column was written, Fatima al-Rashid, and next to it, in parentheses, a note in English, apparently made for internal reporting. Maiden name, Merkusheva. This entry became her epitaph, a legal document recording the transformation of a living person into raw material for nameless recipients. She believed in the fairy tale because its staging was flawless, a title, luxury, an instant marriage proposal. But behind this facade lay not love, but cold commercial calculation. In a world where human organs have a market value of hundreds of thousands of dollars, the most intimate human feelings, trust, hope, love, become commodities. They are used as bait. Olga's story is not a story of unhappy love. It is a story about how deadly dangerous an illusion can be, especially in the age of social media, where anyone can create an image of themselves as a prince. Criminal syndicates have learned to exploit this universal dream of a miracle, turning it into a well-oiled conveyor belt. Perhaps real princes do exist, but the story of Olga and many others who remain nameless serves as a stark reminder that in the 21st century, a fairy tale that seems too good to be true is most often a carefully planned trap, and the price for believing in it can be absolute.